The conference room buzzed with different voices, each speaking in their own language through universal translators. Davis Reed sat at the far end of the long table, watching the alien council members argue about security protocols. He had been on Helios 7 station for 2 months now, hired as a security consultant after raiders attacked a nearby mining colony. The pay was good, and the work was interesting, but nobody seemed to want to listen to his advice. Brex, the Quellan dignitary, slammed his 3-fingered hand on the table. His purple skin darkened with irritation. "We have discussed this enough. Our plasma defense grid is more than adequate for any threat." Davis leaned forward slightly. "With respect, Counselor, I have reviewed your defense systems. They are impressive, but you have no backup plan if the primary systems fail." Sula, the Torth military advisor, made a clicking sound that the translator rendered as laughter. Her tall, thin frame towered over the table even while sitting. Her silver eyes fixed on Davis with obvious amusement. "Backup plan? Human. Our technology has evolved beyond the need for such primitive concerns. Energy weapons are the standard across 70% of known space." "That is exactly my point," Davis said calmly. He pulled up a holographic display showing various weapon systems. "I recommend integrating kinetic weapons into your security protocols. Rifles, shotguns, simple firearms that do not rely on power cells or computer systems." The room fell silent for a moment. Then Brex began to laugh. It started as a low rumble and grew louder. Soon, several other council members joined in. Even the normally stoic Henna, the insectoid trade representative, made a chittering sound of amusement. "Kinetic weapons?" Brex wiped at his large eyes. "You mean those ancient devices that throw metal pellets using chemical explosions? The ones your species used to hunt animals with?" Davis felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice level. "Those weapons have served humanity well for over 1,000 years. They are reliable, simple to maintain, and they work in conditions that would disable energy weapons." Sula stood up, her hand resting on the plasma pistol at her hip. "Let me show you why your suggestion is absurd." She drew the weapon with fluid grace. The pistol hummed to life, glowing with blue energy. "This weapon contains enough power for 500 shots. It has no recoil, so even a child can fire it accurately. The targeting computer compensates for distance, wind, and movement. It can punch through most armor and cauterize wounds, preventing blood loss in friendly fire situations." She holstered the weapon and looked down at Davis. "Your kinetic weapons require you to carry heavy ammunition. They have recoil that throws off aim. They need constant cleaning and maintenance. They can jam or misfire. They are loud and give away your position. And most importantly, they are slow. By the time you load one of your bullets, I can fire 10 shots. Other council members nodded in agreement. A small reptilian ambassador named Kiev spoke up. "I have read about human history. Your species fought wars with these weapons. Millions died because of them. Why would we adopt technology that you yourselves have moved beyond?" Davis took a breath. "We have not moved beyond them. Human military forces still use kinetic weapons alongside energy weapons. There is wisdom in having multiple options." Brex waved his hand dismissively. "Perhaps for humans who come from a world where things break and fail constantly. But we have advanced past such concerns. Our weapons are crafted with precision. Our power systems are redundant. We do not need ancient solutions to modern problems." "Every system can fail," Davis said quietly. "I have seen it happen. Energy weapons are vulnerable to electromagnetic interference, power grid failures, and environmental conditions. A simple kinetic weapon will fire in a vacuum underwater in extreme heat or cold. It needs no battery, no computer, no complex systems." Sula made that clicking laugh again. "You sound like someone trying to sell fire to a species that has fusion reactors. It is almost charming in a primitive way." Davis felt the sting of her words but refused to show it. "I am simply trying to ensure this station is properly defended." Brex stood up, signaling the end of the discussion. "We appreciate your concern, Human Davis, but this council has made its decision. We will not waste resources on outdated technology. Our energy weapons have protected this station for 30 years without incident. That will not change." The other council members began to file out of the room. Sula paused at the door and looked back at Davis. "You may keep your personal weapon, of course. We would not want you to feel unsafe with your primitive tools." Her tone made it clear she was mocking him. Soon, only Davis remained in the conference room. He looked at the holographic display still floating in front of him, showing diagrams of rifles and ammunition. With a swipe of his hand, he dismissed the image. A soft voice spoke from the doorway. "I thought your points were valid." Davis turned to see a young Quellen wearing an engineer's uniform. His skin was lighter than Brex's, more blue than purple. He stepped into the room nervously. "My name is Fenn. I work in station maintenance." The young alien approached slowly. "I have studied human technology. Your species has a talent for creating things that last. Simple, robust designs." Davis managed a small smile. "Thank you. But it seems the council disagrees." Fenn glanced at the door, making sure they were alone. "Counselor Brex is very proud. He helped design the current defense systems. Suggesting they are incomplete is like telling him his children are ugly." "I am not trying to insult anyone," Davis said. "I just want to help. I know." Fenn moved closer to the table. "Would you be willing to demonstrate one of your kinetic weapons? Not for the council, but for those of us who are curious. I've never seen one fired in person." Davis considered this. "The station has a waste disposal range where they test new equipment. I could set up a demonstration there." Fenn's large eyes brightened. "I would very much like to see that. Perhaps others would too if word spreads quietly." "All right," Davis agreed. "I will arrange it for 3 days from now. But Fenn, do not expect anything flashy. These are tools, not toys." The young engineer nodded enthusiastically. "I understand. Sometimes the best tools are the simple ones." "That is true for engineering, and I suspect it is true for weapons as well." After Fenn left, Davis sat alone in the conference room for a while longer. He thought about the council's dismissive attitude, about Sula's mocking tone, about Brex's laughter. They saw him as someone clinging to the past, unable to accept progress. But Davis had been in combat. He had seen advanced technology fail at the worst possible moments. He had watched soldiers die because their fancy weapons stopped working when they needed them most. He had learned the hard way that complexity was the enemy of reliability. He stood up and headed back to his quarters. His rifle was there, a simple bolt-action design that his grandfather had given him. It was old, scarred from use, and it had never failed him once in 20 years. 3 days from now, he would show these aliens what humanity had learned through centuries of warfare. He would show them that sometimes the old ways survived because they worked. 3 days passed quickly on Helios 7. Davis spent his time preparing for the demonstration, checking his rifle, cleaning each part with practiced care. He selected ammunition carefully, choosing rounds that would show different capabilities without being wasteful. His quarters were small but comfortable, and he used the desk to organize everything he would need. Word had spread quietly about the demonstration, just as Fenn had promised. When Davis arrived at the waste disposal range, he found about 15 people waiting. Most were junior security officers, their young faces curious. A handful of merchants stood to one side, probably hoping for entertainment during their layover. Fenn was there too, practically bouncing with excitement despite his species' usually calm demeanor. The range itself was a large chamber at the edge of the station, designed for testing equipment that might malfunction. Thick walls absorbed energy blasts and contained explosions. One entire side open to space, protected by a force field that allowed waste to be ejected into the void. Davis had already set up targets at different distances, using materials from the station's supply room. He placed his rifle case on a bench and opened it slowly. The weapon inside was worn but well maintained. Dark metal, smooth wood stock, and simple iron sights. Nothing electronic, nothing that glowed or hummed. Several aliens leaned forward to get a better look, their expressions puzzled. A young Torth security officer named Rin spoke up. "That is your weapon? It looks like something from a museum." Davis lifted the rifle carefully, showing proper handling. "This design is over 200 years old. It fires a .308 Winchester round, which is a cartridge that has been in use for even longer." He held the rifle so everyone could see it clearly. "This is a bolt-action rifle. After each shot, I manually cycle the bolt to eject the spent casing and load a new round. It holds 5 rounds in an internal magazine." A merchant made a skeptical noise. "Only 5 shots?" "My cargo security pistol has unlimited shots as long as the power cell is charged." "True," Davis agreed. "But what happens when your power cell dies? Or when an electromagnetic pulse fries your weapon's circuits?" The merchant had no answer to that. Davis walked to the firing line, a clearly marked position on the floor. "I am going to demonstrate some basic capabilities. Please stay behind the safety barrier." He loaded 5 rounds into the rifle, the metallic click of each bullet sliding into the magazine loud in the quiet room. Then he worked the bolt, chambering the first round. The sound was simple but somehow authoritative. "First target is 100 meters, Davis announced. He raised the rifle to his shoulder, settling into a proper stance. His breathing slowed, became measured. The room was silent now, everyone watching. The rifle cracked once. The sound was sharp and violent, nothing like the clean hum of energy weapons. Several aliens flinched. A puff of dust appeared on the target downrange. "Center mass," Fenn reported, looking through optical magnification equipment. "Direct hit." Davis worked the bolt smoothly. The brass casing ejected, spinning through the air and clinking on the floor. He chambered another round and fired again. Another hit. He continued until all 5 rounds were spent, each shot finding its target. "Not bad for ancient technology," Wren admitted. "But the recoil looks difficult to control, and you have to manually reload after each shot." "The recoil is manageable with proper technique," Davis said. He reloaded the rifle. "And yes, the manual action is slower than automatic fire, but it also means fewer moving parts to break." He pointed to targets at 300 meters. "Watch this, 4 shots, 4 hits." The aliens murmured among themselves. This was more impressive than they had expected. "Now 500 meters, Davis said. He adjusted his stance slightly, compensating for the greater distance. The first shot took longer to aim. When he fired, there was a pause before Fenn's excited voice called out, "Hit!" It went completely through the target. Davis lowered the rifle and walked to retrieve one of the targets. He brought it back to show the group. The bullet hole was clean through both sides of the reinforced polymer material. "This is the same material you use for hull repairs. An energy weapon would have left a burn mark and maybe punched through. This went through without even slowing down." A security officer touched the hole carefully. "That is disturbing." "That is physics," Davis corrected. "A solid projectile traveling at high velocity carries tremendous kinetic energy." He returned to the firing line and opened a different ammunition box. "These are armor-piercing rounds. They have a hardened core designed to penetrate heavy plating." He loaded one and fired at a thick piece of scrap metal. The round punched through and sparked off the back wall. "These are hollow point rounds," he continued, showing the next type. "They expand on impact, creating larger wound channels. Less penetration, more stopping power." He fired at a ballistic gel dummy he had prepared. The round entered small and left a massive cavity inside. "And these are frangible rounds. They break apart on impact, reducing over-penetration risk in sensitive areas like spacecraft where you do not want to breach the hull." The demonstration continued for an hour. Davis showed them how to field strip the rifle, how each part worked together. He explained cleaning procedures, showed them how simple the maintenance was. No computers to diagnose, no proprietary tools needed, just oil, cloth, and basic understanding. Then he did something that made several aliens gasp. He walked to a water tank used for coolant testing and dunked the entire rifle underwater. He held it there for a full minute while everyone stared. Then he pulled it out, shook off the excess water, worked the bolt a few times, and fired at a target. The shot hit perfectly. "Water does not stop it?" Wren asked, disbelief clear in her voice. "Not immediately. If I left it submerged for hours, rust would become an issue. But for short-term exposure, it functions fine." He repeated the test with sand, deliberately getting debris into the action. A few quick motions to clear the bolt and the rifle fired again. Then he placed it in a cold storage unit set to -40 degrees for 10 minutes. When he pulled it out, frost covered the metal. He fired it anyway. It worked perfectly. Fenn was frantically taking notes. Several security officers looked thoughtful, rather than amused now. Even the merchants seemed impressed. Davis was demonstrating the rifle's function in simulated heat when Sula arrived. The Torth military advisor stopped at the entrance, her silver eyes scanning the scene. Her expression was unreadable, but her posture radiated disapproval. She watched Davis fire 3 more shots, each one striking the target with consistent accuracy. Then she walked forward, her long legs carrying her quickly to the firing line. "An interesting demonstration," she said coldly. "You have shown that your primitive weapon can function in harsh conditions. But this proves nothing about combat effectiveness." Davis lowered his rifle. "With respect, Commander Sula, reliability is the foundation of combat effectiveness. A weapon that fails at the critical moment is worse than no weapon at all." "Our weapons do not fail," Sula said sharply. "They are engineered to the highest standards in the galaxy." "I'm sure they are," Davis replied calmly. "But engineering cannot account for every variable. I am simply suggesting that having a backup option is prudent." Sula's hand rested on her plasma pistol. Your weapon is slow, primitive, and limited. In a real fight, I would eliminate you before you could fire your second shot. Davis said nothing. He simply began packing up his rifle, his movements careful and deliberate. Fenn stepped forward nervously. Commander, the demonstration was quite educational. Perhaps there is value in understanding different approaches to— Dismissed, engineer, Sula cut him off. She looked at the other aliens present. All of you have duties to attend to. This show is over. The crowd dispersed reluctantly. As they left, Davis heard several of them talking quietly about what they had seen. Fenn lingered for a moment, giving Davis an apologetic look before hurrying away. Sula remained until everyone else was gone. She studied Davis with those strange silver eyes. You waste your time, human. This station does not need your ancient weapons. Davis closed his rifle case. I hope you are right, Commander. I truly do. She turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the empty range. A week crawled by with growing tension. Davis continued his regular duties, inspecting security checkpoints and reviewing patrol schedules. The demonstration at the range had sparked some interest among junior personnel, but the council remained dismissive. Brack sent a memo reminding everyone that unauthorized weapons were not to be integrated into official protocols. Sula made a point of ignoring Davis whenever they crossed paths in the corridors. The threats started small. Anonymous messages appeared on public communication boards, warning that Helios 7 had betrayed Drellish interests by signing trade agreements with human corporations. The Drellish were a newer species in galactic politics, territorial and aggressive. Their government claimed the station had violated neutrality agreements. Station security increased patrols but remained confident. Sula held briefings where she assured everyone that the plasma defense grid could handle any attack. The energy shields surrounding critical areas were rated to withstand sustained assault. The automated turrets covering all approach vectors had never failed in 30 years of operation. Davis attended these briefings and said nothing. He had learned that offering warnings only earned him mockery. On the 8th day after his demonstration, the council held an emergency diplomatic session. A Drellish delegation had demanded face-to-face negotiations. The council agreed, hoping to defuse the situation peacefully. Ambassadors, merchants, and various dignitaries crowded into the main conference center. Security was tight, with Sula personally overseeing the arrangements. Davis was in his quarters when it happened. He had just finished cleaning his rifle, a habit he maintained every 3 days. The weapon lay disassembled on his desk, each part laid out in precise order. He was wiping down the bolt assembly when the lights flickered. Then everything went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in after 2 seconds, bathing everything in dim red. Davis's first instinct was to reassemble his rifle. His hands moved automatically, years of practice letting him work without full vision. Barrel, receiver, bolt, magazine. 30 seconds and the weapon was whole again. His communication pad was dead. The door controls were unresponsive. He grabbed his rifle and the combat vest he kept in his closet, loaded with extra magazines. Something was very wrong. The door to his quarters could be manually overridden. Davis cranked the emergency release and the door slid open halfway. He squeezed through into the corridor beyond. Other doors were opening too, confused residents emerging into the red-lit hallway. Then he heard it. Gunfire. Not the clean hum of plasma weapons, but the sharp crack of kinetic rounds. The sound echoed through the metal corridors, distant but unmistakable. An explosion boomed somewhere deep in the station. The floor shook. Screaming started, voices crying out in panic and pain. Davis moved toward the sound, his rifle ready. Years of military training took over, his body falling into combat patterns. He stayed close to walls, checked corners, kept his breathing steady. A group of civilians ran past him, fleeing in terror. A mother carried a small child, both of them crying. Davis let them pass and continued forward. He rounded a corner and found the first body. A security officer. A young Quellan he recognized from the rifle demonstration. The officer's plasma rifle lay beside him, completely dead. Scorch marks on his chest showed where he had been killed. Davis checked for a pulse anyway, but the officer was gone. More gunfire ahead, closer now. Davis picked up his pace, moving quickly but carefully. He passed more dead security personnel, all of them killed while their advanced weapons failed to function. Whatever had hit the station had disabled every energy weapon simultaneously. An electromagnetic pulse. It had to be. A massive EMP burst, powerful enough to fry electronics throughout the entire station. The emergency systems were hardened against such attacks, which was why the backup lights still worked. But weapons, personal devices, and most computers would be dead. Davis reached a junction where 3 corridors met. Bodies lay everywhere. Civilians and security alike cut down without mercy. Blood covered the floor, making footing treacherous. The metallic smell of it filled his nose. Movement ahead. Davis dropped to one knee behind a support pillar, his rifle coming up to his shoulder. 3 figures advanced down the corridor, wearing heavy armor and carrying kinetic rifles. Drellish raiders, their reptilian features visible through their helmet visors. They were herding a group of civilians ahead of them, using the prisoners as shields. Davis counted 15 hostages, most of them terrified beyond rational thought. One of the raiders fired a burst into the ceiling, the noise deafening in the enclosed space. The hostages screamed and moved faster. Davis could not take a shot without risking the civilians. He stayed hidden, watching the group pass. Once they turned the corner, he followed at a distance. The raiders were moving toward the central plaza, the largest open area on the station. That made tactical sense. Gather all the hostages in one place, easier to control and defend. Davis needed to reach security headquarters, find out if anyone was organizing a response. He took a different route, using maintenance corridors that most people forgot existed. His time studying the station layout paid off now. He moved through narrow passages meant for repair crews, climbing up a level to avoid the main paths. Voices ahead made him freeze. 2 raiders stood guard at an intersection, blocking access to the security wing. They spoke in Drellish, their harsh language not translating through Davis's dead earpiece. But their body language was clear. They were nervous, glancing around constantly. Davis found a good position 20 meters away, behind a junction box that provided solid cover. He settled into a prone position, rifle braced against his shoulder. The angle was awkward, but he had taken harder shots. He controlled his breathing, lined up the iron sights, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked once. The first raider dropped, a red flower blooming on his armor's weak point at the neck seal. The second raider spun, trying to locate the threat. Davis worked the bolt and fired again. The second raider fell. Davis stayed in position for 10 seconds, watching for more targets. When none appeared, he moved forward quickly. He checked both raiders to ensure they were dead, then took their extra ammunition. Different caliber from his rifle, but he might find a weapon that could use it. The security headquarters door was sealed. Davis pounded on it with his fist. "Friendly!" Human security consultant. Nothing happened for a long moment. Then the door cracked open slightly. A plasma pistol barrel poked through, held by shaking hands. Sula's voice came from inside, harsh and stressed. "Davis." "Let me in, Commander." The door opened wider. Davis slipped inside and Sula sealed it behind him. The security headquarters was dark except for emergency lights. 4 officers huddled inside, all of them looking shell-shocked. Sula herself had a cut on her forehead, blue blood trickling down her face. "How many?" Davis asked simply. 20 attackers, maybe more," Sula said. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "They hit us with some kind of electromagnetic weapon. Everything electronic is dead. All our weapons are useless." She gestured to the plasma rifles stacked against the wall. "Now just expensive clubs. How many civilian casualties?" Davis asked, unknown. "They are gathering everyone in the central plaza. We heard the announcement over the emergency speakers." Sula looked at Davis's rifle. For the first time since he met her, he saw something other than arrogance in her eyes. It was fear. "Your weapon still works." "Yes," Davis said simply. "I heard shots," Sula continued. 2 raiders were guarding this corridor. "They are not anymore." Sula stared at him. Then she looked at the other officers. "We have been trapped here for 20 minutes. Our weapons are dead. We have been waiting for backup that will not come." She turned back to Davis. "But you have a working weapon." Davis checked his rifle, confirming he had a full magazine. "I have about 40 rounds total. Against 20 or more attackers with automatic weapons. That is not good odds." "It is better than what we have," Sula said quietly. One of the other officers, the young Torth named Rin, who had attended the demonstration, spoke up. "The armory. The main armory on level 3. Could we reach it?" Sula shook her head. "The armory contains energy weapons. All useless now." "Not all," Davis said slowly. Everyone looked at him. 2 months ago, I requested permission to store some equipment for training purposes. The council denied using them officially, but they let me keep them in the auxiliary armory. The one for outdated equipment. What kind of equipment? Sula asked. 6 shotguns and 4 hunting rifles. Not military grade, but functional. And about 2,000 rounds of ammunition. Hope flickered across Sula's face. Where? Sub-level 2, Section 12. But that is on the other side of the station from here. Sula looked at her officers, then back at Davis. Can you get us there? Davis thought about the layout, the likely positions of enemy forces, the risk factors. Every instinct told him this was dangerous. But looking at these frightened officers, at Sula's desperate eyes, he knew he had no choice. Yes, he said. I can get us there. But we move quietly, we move carefully, and you follow my lead exactly. Sula nodded. Agreed. Davis led them through the maintenance corridors, moving slowly and deliberately. Every sound made them freeze. Every shadow could hide an enemy. The station creaked and groaned around them, damaged systems struggling to maintain basic life support. The air tasted stale and metallic. Sula stayed close behind Davis, her useless plasma pistol still in her hand. She could not seem to let it go, even though it was just dead weight now. The other 3 officers followed in a tight group, their eyes wide with fear. None of them had ever been in real combat before. Their training had focused on breaking up merchant disputes and handling drunk tourists, not fighting a military assault. They descended through a service shaft, climbing down a ladder that seemed to go on forever. Davis went first, his rifle slung across his back. He had explained that they needed to stay quiet, that gunfire would bring every enemy on the station down on them. But if they encountered raiders, he would have no choice but to shoot. The auxiliary armory was located in an old section of the station, a part that had been built in the early days before the current high-tech systems were installed. The corridors here were narrower, the lighting even dimmer. It was a forgotten area, used mainly for storage of obsolete equipment. They were halfway there when they heard voices. Davis held up his fist, the universal signal to stop. Everyone froze. The voices came from around the next corner, speaking in Drellish. At least 2 speakers, maybe 3. They sounded relaxed, confident. Davis motioned for the others to stay put. He crept forward alone, moving with practiced silence. At the corner, he risked a quick glance. 3 raiders stood in the corridor, blocking the path they needed to take. They had removed their helmets, their scaly green faces visible in the emergency lighting. They were passing around a flask, drinking something and laughing. Their weapons leaned against the wall, close at hand but not immediately ready. Davis pulled back and returned to the group. He held up 3 fingers, then pointed at his rifle. Sula understood immediately. She leaned close and whispered in his ear, her breath warm against his skin. Can you take all 3? Davis considered. 3 targets, they were distracted, but the moment he fired the first shot, they would react. Even drunk or relaxed soldiers could grab weapons and return fire in seconds. But there was no other route to the armory. They had to go through here. He nodded slowly. Sula's eyes showed doubt, but she trusted him to try. Davis moved back to the corner. He settled into a kneeling position, bracing his rifle against the wall for stability. He took 3 deep breaths, forcing his heartbeat to slow. Combat was not about speed. It was about precision. He leaned out just enough to see his targets. The raiders were still talking, still laughing. One of them took another drink from the flask. Davis lined up his sights on the closest raider's center mass. The first shot cracked through the corridor. The raider jerked backward, the flask falling from his hand. Before the others could react, Davis worked the bolt and fired again. The second raider was reaching for his weapon when the bullet caught him in the chest. He fell hard. The third raider was faster. He grabbed his rifle and dove behind a support pillar. Davis's third shot sparked off the metal where the raider had been a second before. Now it became dangerous. The raider was in cover, armed and alert. Davis could hear him shouting into a communicator, calling for backup. The element of surprise was gone. Stay back, Davis ordered the others. He moved to a different position, trying to get an angle on the raider's hiding spot. But the corridor was narrow, and the pillar provided good cover in both directions. The raider fired a burst. Bullets ricocheted off the walls, forcing Davis to duck back. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Return fire came from a different angle than Davis expected. The raider was moving, trying to flank them. Davis made a decision. He grabbed a piece of debris from the floor and threw it to his left. It clattered loudly. The raider fired toward the sound, giving away his new position. Davis leaned out and fired twice. The first shot missed, but the second one found its mark. The raider fell silent. "Move now," Davis ordered. They ran past the bodies, not stopping to check them. More voices echoed from behind them. Angry shouts and running footsteps. The backup was coming. They reached the armory door 3 minutes later. Davis tried the manual override, but it was stuck. Years of disuse had frozen the mechanism. "Help me," he said to Rin. Together, they pulled on the emergency lever. Metal groaned. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. The raiders had found their dead comrades and were following the blood trail. The door finally gave way with a screech of protesting metal. They tumbled inside and Davis slammed it shut. There was no way to lock it from inside, but at least it would slow the raiders down. The armory was small and dusty. Boxes of equipment lined the walls, covered in years of grime. Davis ran to the far corner where he had stored his weapons. He ripped open the first crate. 6 pump-action shotguns lay inside, wrapped in protective cloth. He grabbed one and tossed it to Sula. She caught it awkwardly, staring at the weapon like it might bite her. "Pump the forend," Davis instructed quickly. "That chamber's a round. Point at target, pull trigger, pump again. 8 shots before reload." He demonstrated the motion rapidly. More shotguns went to the other officers. Then he opened the second crate containing 4 hunting rifles, similar to his own but slightly different models. He kept his own rifle and distributed the others. The ammunition crates were heavy. Davis ripped them open, showing them boxes of shells and cartridges. "Load everything you can carry. Stuff your pockets." Sula fumbled with the shotgun shells, her hands shaking. "I have never fired one of these." "You're about to learn fast," Davis said. He showed her how to load the tubular magazine under the barrel, how to thumb the shells in one at a time. The other officers watched and copied his movements. Rin picked up one of the hunting rifles. Her hand steadied as she felt the weight of it. "This one feels balanced. Good, that is yours now." Davis handed her ammunition. 5 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. Work the bolt after each shot like you saw me do at the demonstration. Pounding on the door made them all jump. Voices shouted in Drellish, demanding they open up. The door shuddered under repeated impacts. "We cannot stay here," Sula said, her voice tight with stress. Davis looked around the armory. There was a ventilation shaft in the ceiling, but it would be slow going and they would be vulnerable. The door was the only way out and enemies waited on the other side. "We go through them," Davis said simply. "What?" One of the officers, a small insectoid named Pip, stared at him in horror. "There are too many." "Maybe," Davis agreed. "But they are expecting us to be unarmed. They are not expecting us to have working weapons. We use that surprise to hit them hard and fast, then we move to a more defensible position." Sula loaded the last shell into her shotgun. She pumped it, chambering around. The mechanical sound was satisfying and solid. "Where?" "Security headquarters was too isolated. We need to link up with other survivors, gather our forces." Davis checked his rifle one more time. "The central plaza. That is where they have the hostages. If we can free even some of them, we even the odds." "That is suicide," Pip whispered. "Staying here is suicide," Davis countered. "They will breach that door in minutes. This armory has no other exits. We die here, or we fight our way out and maybe live." The pounding on the door intensified. Metal began to dent inward. They were using something heavy as a battering ram. Davis moved to position beside the door. On my signal, Sula opens the door. I go first, sweep right. Sula goes second, sweep left. Everyone else follows and picks targets. Aim center mass, do not worry about perfect shots, just put rounds downrange. "Ready?" The officers looked terrified, but they nodded. Sula positioned herself at the door control. Her silver eyes met Davis's, and he saw determination there alongside the fear. "Now," Davis said. Sula yanked the emergency lever. The door shot open. Raiders on the other side stumbled backward, surprised. Davis was already moving, his rifle up and firing. The first raider went down. He worked the bolt, fired again. Another raider fell. Sula's shotgun roared, the blast catching a raider full in the chest and sending him flying backward. She pumped and fired again, the recoil making her stagger, but her grip held firm. Rin came through the door, her rifle cracking steadily. She was a natural shot, her bullets finding targets with surprising accuracy. The other officers fired their shotguns, the corridor filling with smoke and noise and chaos. The raiders had not expected resistance. Half their force was down before they recovered from the shock. The survivors scrambled for cover, returning fire desperately. "Move forward," Davis shouted. He kept firing, forcing the raiders to keep their heads down. The group advanced down the corridor, stepping over bodies, their weapons speaking with mechanical violence. A raider popped up from cover. Pip's shotgun blast caught him before he could aim. Another tried to flank them. Rin shot him twice. The hunting rifle's crack was sharp and authoritative. They reached a junction and Davis called for them to halt. Everyone pressed against the walls, breathing hard. Sula's shotgun was empty. Davis showed her how to reload, feeding shells into the loading port. Her hands were steadier now, her initial panic burned away by action. "How many did we face?" Sula asked. 7 that I saw. Maybe 8. "We killed them all." There was wonder in her voice. Wonder and horror mixed together. She looked at the shotgun in her hands with new respect and new fear. Davis reloaded his rifle with quick, practiced movements. That was the easy part. Now we have to reach the plaza and free the hostages. That is where their main force will be concentrated. "How many rounds do we have left?" Rin asked. She was checking her rifle, mimicking Davis's earlier motions. Everyone checked their ammunition. The count was not good. Maybe 200 rounds total between all of them, against an unknown number of enemies in a fortified position. "It will have to be enough," Davis said. They moved through the damaged station like ghosts, learning to use the shadows and the silence. Davis taught them as they went, whispering instructions about tactical movement and covering angles. They were not soldiers, but fear and adrenaline made them learn fast. Every corner could hide death, and that reality focused their minds wonderfully. Fen found them on level 3. The young Quellan engineer emerged from a maintenance hatch, nearly getting shot by Pip before Davis recognized him and called out. Fen was carrying a heavy toolkit and looked exhausted. "I've been trying to restore communications," Fen explained quickly, his words tumbling out in a rush. "The EMP fried most systems, but some of the hardened emergency networks might be recoverable. I heard gunfire and thought everyone was dead until I recognized the sound of your rifle." Davis pulled him into their group. "Can you get any systems operational? Doors, lights, anything we could use?" Fen nodded eagerly. "The emergency broadcast system. It is old technology, mostly mechanical. I think I can activate it from the engineering control room on this level, but that room has windows overlooking the central plaza." "How many hostages are in the plaza?" Sula asked. "At least 200, Fen said. His large eyes reflected pain. "I saw them being herded there before I went into the maintenance tunnels. The raiders have them sitting in the center, completely exposed. Anyone who tries to run gets shot. They have killed 6 people already to make examples." Sula's jaw tightened. 200 civilians, including children and elders. The entire population of the station's residential sector. All of them helpless while their protectors had failed. "How many raiders guard them?" Davis asked. "I counted 12 around the perimeter, but there might be more in the upper galleries. The plaza has 4 levels of balconies, lots of positions for snipers." Davis considered the tactical situation. It was a nightmare scenario. The hostages were in an open space, completely exposed. The raiders had superior numbers and good defensive positions. His group had limited ammunition and no real combat experience except for him, but they also had surprise. The raiders thought all weapons on the station were disabled. They were not expecting armed resistance. "Fen, can you access the lighting controls for the plaza?" Davis asked. The engineer thought for a moment. "Yes, from the same control room. The emergency power grid is separate from the main systems. It would still be functional." A plan began forming in Davis's mind. Risky, probably insane, but better than nothing. "Here is what we are going to do." He laid it out for them quickly. Fen would access the controls and cut the lights on his signal. In the confusion and darkness, Davis and Rin, the 2 best shots, would take elevated positions and eliminate the guards on the plaza floor. Sula and the others would secure the hostages and get them moving toward the emergency evacuation corridors. "The raiders will respond fast," Davis warned. "We will have maybe 2 minutes before they adapt and start firing blindly into the crowd. We need to use those 2 minutes perfectly." "What about the snipers in the upper galleries?" Pip asked nervously. "I will handle them," Davis said. It was not bravado. It was simply necessity. He was the most experienced shooter. If anyone could take out hidden enemies in darkness, it was him. They moved toward the engineering control room. The corridors grew wider as they approached the plaza, the station's architecture opening up. They could hear voices now, the raiders shouting orders, the hostages crying softly. The control room door was locked but not guarded. Fen bypassed it quickly using his engineering access codes, which still worked because they were stored locally rather than on the dead central network. They slipped inside. Large windows showed the plaza below. Davis moved to them carefully, staying in the shadows. The sight made his jaw clench. 200 people sat huddled together in the center of the vast open space. Men, women, children of a dozen different species, all of them terrified. 12 raiders walked the perimeter with weapons ready. Davis studied their patterns, their spacing, their equipment. Upper galleries. Rin whispered beside him. She pointed to movement on the third-level balcony. There and there. 4 snipers at least, Davis nodded. He had seen them too. Fen, how long do you need to access the lighting controls? 2 minutes. Maybe 3. The engineer was already at the control panel, his fingers moving over mechanical switches and manual overrides. Davis scanned the plaza again, planning his shots. He had 17 rounds left in his pouches, 17 chances to save 200 lives. The math was brutal, but it was all he had. Sula came up beside him, her shotgun reloaded and ready. I was wrong about you, she said quietly. About your weapons. About everything. We can discuss that later, Davis replied. Right now I need you focused. I am. Her silver eyes met his. Tell me what to do and I will do it. Fen's voice came from the control panel. Ready, just say the word. Davis looked at his small team. 5 people with barely any training, facing an entrenched enemy force. But they had surprise, they had determination, and they had weapons that worked. It would have to be enough. He raised his rifle and found his first target through the window. A raider standing near the hostages, his back turned. An easy shot at this distance. Davis took a breath, held it, and spoke calmly. Now. The lights went out. The plaza plunged into absolute darkness. Screams erupted from the hostages. Raiders shouted in confusion. Davis fired through the window, the glass shattering. His first target dropped. He worked the bolt and found his second target by memory and muzzle flash as the raiders started firing blindly. Another shot, another fallen enemy. Rin fired beside him, her rifle cracking steadily. She was aiming at the perimeter guards, dropping them one by one. Her accuracy was remarkable for someone who had only started shooting an hour ago. Sula and the others burst into the plaza through a side entrance. Their shotguns roared in the darkness, muzzle flashes lighting up confused raiders. The raiders on the perimeter began falling back, trying to regroup. Davis shifted his aim to the upper galleries. A sniper's position gave away his location with a muzzle flash. Davis fired at the flash. A scream and a body fell from the balcony. He found another sniper and fired again. Miss, he adjusted and fired once more. The sniper stopped shooting. 2 minutes, Davis counted in his head. They had maybe 1 minute left before this turned into a massacre. Hostages moving. Sula's voice came from below. East corridor, everyone move. The civilians were running now, stumbling in the darkness but moving away from the kill zone. Sula and her team provided covering fire, their shotguns keeping the raiders pinned down. A raider got smart and threw an illumination flare. Bright light flooded part of the plaza. Suddenly everyone was visible again. Davis saw a raider taking aim at a group of fleeing children. His rifle cracked. The raider fell. But more raiders were adapting now, taking cover and returning accurate fire. Bullets sparked off the metal around Davis and Rin. Fall back, Davis ordered. They had done what they could from this position. They ran from the control room as raiders began firing at the windows. The glass exploded inward, showering the room with shards. They made it to the corridor and kept running. Below in the plaza, Sula was the last one out. She fired her shotgun until it clicked empty, then she ran. A raider tried to follow. Pip, showing surprising courage, stepped out and blasted the raider with his shotgun at point-blank range. They regrouped in a service corridor 3 levels down. Everyone was breathing hard, adrenaline making their hands shake. Davis did a quick head count. All his people were alive, though Pip had taken a graze wound on his arm. How many did we get? Sula asked. 8 confirmed kills on the perimeter, Rin reported. Maybe 2 in the galleries. That leaves roughly 10 raiders, Davis calculated. And now they know we are armed and dangerous. But the hostages are free, Fen said. Most of them anyway. I saw them reaching the evacuation corridors. Sula nodded. We split their forces. Some will have to chase the hostages, others will hunt us. We divided their advantage. Davis was checking his ammunition when he heard new sounds. Boots in the corridor, lots of them, coming from multiple directions. The raiders were converging on their position. "We are surrounded," Pip said, his voice rising with panic. Davis looked around quickly. They were in a junction with 4 corridors meeting. Bad position for defense, too many angles to cover. But there was a cargo lift shaft nearby, currently unpowered but with manual access. "The shaft," he said. "We go down." They pried open the lift doors and looked into darkness below. A ladder ran down the wall of the shaft, disappearing into the depths. It was their only option. The maintenance room smelled of oil and metal and fear. They sat in the dim emergency lighting, catching their breath and taking stock. Pip's arm wound was bandaged with torn cloth. Rin cleaned her rifle with a piece of fabric, mimicking movements she had seen Davis make. Sula stared at her empty shotgun like she was seeing it for the first time. Fen tapped at a wall-mounted diagnostic panel, one of the old mechanical types that still functioned. "I am reading massive damage to the main power systems," he reported. "But life support is stable. The EMP did not reach the deep infrastructure. Can you restore communications?" Davis asked. "Not from here. I would need access to the primary communication hub on level 2. Fen looked up from the panel. "But I can restore partial power to some sections. Lights, doors, maybe some environmental controls." Davis considered this. Power meant options. It also meant the raiders could use those systems too. But right now they needed every advantage they could get. Do it. But be selective. Power to evacuation corridors and emergency shelters, but leave the main routes dark. Make them work for every meter. Fen nodded and went to work on the panel, bypassing burned circuits and rerouting connections manually. The young engineer's hands were steady now. His earlier fear burned away by focus and purpose. A sound echoed through the ventilation system. Voices distant but growing closer. The raiders were searching level by level, hunting them methodically. "We cannot stay here," Sula said. Her earlier panic was gone, replaced by cold calculation. "They will find us eventually. Then we take the fight to them," Davis replied. "But on our terms, not theirs." He stood and moved to the door, listening carefully. The voices were coming from the east corridor. That meant the west was probably clear for now. "Their leader," Davis said suddenly. "During the initial attack, there was a lot of coordination. Someone is directing them, keeping them organized despite losing half their force. If we take out the leader, the rest might break." Rin looked up from her rifle. "How do we find one specific raider among the survivors?" "We do not have to find him," Davis said. "We make him come to us." He explained his plan quickly. It was dangerous, maybe suicidal, but it was also the only way to end this before they ran out of ammunition or luck. Fen would restore power to the central plaza, making it look like they were trying to reactivate the station's defenses. The raiders would have to respond to that threat, would have to send their leader to oversee it. Meanwhile, Davis and the others would be waiting in elevated positions. "It is a trap," Pip said nervously. "Yes," Davis agreed. "But sometimes the best defense is a well-set trap." Sula stood up and checked her shotgun. She had 4 shells left. "I am with you." The others nodded their agreement, even Pip, despite his fear. They had come this far together. They would finish it together. They moved through the lower levels like hunters, quiet and purposeful. Fen led them through maintenance tunnels to a position where he could access the power systems. Davis and Rin took positions in the upper galleries overlooking the plaza, the same positions the raider snipers had used earlier. Sula, Pip, and the remaining officer positioned themselves at ground level, behind cover where they could support if things went wrong. Davis settled into his sniper position with his rifle. He had 5 rounds left. 5 chances. He made each one count in his mind, visualizing the shots before they happened. Beside him, Rin had 7 rounds. Together they had 12 shots to end this. "Ready?" Fen's voice came through a hardwired communication line, one of the old systems that had survived the EMP. "Activating power on your signal." Davis watched the plaza through his rifle sights. Empty now except for bodies and debris. Blood stained the floor where the hostages had been sitting. The station's air circulation was failing in some sections, and smoke from earlier fires drifted through the open space. "Now," Davis said quietly. Lights flickered on across the plaza. Computer terminals sparked to life, their screens showing random error messages. It would be obvious to anyone watching that someone was trying to restore systems. They waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Davis's muscles began to ache from holding position, but he remained motionless. Then they came. 6 raiders entered the plaza from different entrances, moving with tactical precision. They spread out, covering angles, watching for threats. These were professionals not panicking despite their losses, and behind them came the leader. Davis recognized him immediately from his bearing, from the way the others deferred to him. Taller than the other Drellish, wearing heavier armor and carrying a more advanced rifle, he strode into the center of the plaza and began issuing orders in harsh, clipped tones. Davis lined up his shot. 400 meters, slight wind from the ventilation system, target in heavy armor. He breathed slowly, let his heartbeat settle. His finger found the trigger. The rifle cracked. The leader staggered but did not fall. The heavy armor had stopped the round. He spun, trying to locate the shooter. His troops scattered for cover. Rin fired. Her shot caught one of the raiders in the leg, dropping him. She worked her bolt and fired again, forcing another raider behind cover. Davis fired his second shot. This time he aimed for the helmet. The leader's visor shattered and he went down hard. The remaining raiders hesitated, their coordination breaking without their commander. Sula and her team emerged from their positions, shotguns roaring. At close range, the shotgun blasts were devastating. 2 raiders fell before they could react. The remaining 3 raiders broke and ran. They had lost their leader, lost more than half their force, and were facing enemies who should have been helpless. Their will shattered like glass. 1 raider made it to an exit. Pip, showing courage nobody expected from the small insectoid, stepped out and fired his shotgun. The raider fell. Another raider tried to surrender, dropping his weapon and raising his hands. Sula kept her shotgun trained on him but did not fire. The last raider turned to fight, bringing his rifle up. Davis and Rin fired simultaneously. The raider collapsed, then it was over. The plaza fell silent except for the groaning of the wounded and the hum of restored power. Smoke drifted through the emergency lights. The smell of blood and gunpowder filled the air. Davis descended from his position slowly, his rifle still ready. But there were no more threats. The raid was broken, the attackers dead or captured. Sula stood over the raider leader's body. She kicked his weapon away, ensuring he was truly dead. Then she looked up at Davis, her silver eyes reflecting something he had not seen before. Respect. True, earned respect. You saved us all, she said simply. Davis ejected his last spent cartridge and let the bolt lock open on his empty rifle. We saved each other. I had the weapons, but you had the courage to use them. Over the next hour, they secured the station. The surviving raiders surrendered without their leader. The freed hostages began returning from the evacuation corridors, traumatized but alive. Fen managed to restore enough power to get basic communications working. A distress call went out. Help would arrive in 12 hours. Until then, they would hold what they had won. 3 weeks later, the station held a memorial service for those who had died. 14 civilians, 6 security officers, all killed in the first moments of the attack before anyone could mount a defense. Davis stood at the back of the crowd, uncomfortable with the attention he had received since the battle. After the service, the council convened. Brex approached Davis, his purple skin dark with shame. I owe you an apology, Human Davis, a sincere apology. My arrogance nearly destroyed us all. Davis accepted the apology with a nod. We all learn from our mistakes, Counselor. The council meeting that followed was different from the 1 week before. This time, everyone listened when Davis spoke. He outlined a complete overhaul of station security, integrating kinetic weapons throughout the defense grid. Energy weapons would remain primary, but every security officer would carry a kinetic backup and train on both systems. Redundancy is not a sign of weakness, Davis explained. It is wisdom. Technology can fail, power systems can be disrupted, but a well-maintained rifle will fire every time you pull the trigger, no matter what. Sula stood and addressed the council. I propose making Human Davis our chief security advisor, with full authority to implement these changes. The vote was unanimous. In the following weeks, Davis oversaw the training of every security officer on the station. The armory, once filled only with plasma rifles and energy weapons, now held racks of shotguns, rifles, and pistols alongside the advanced technology. Officers learned to maintain both types to respect both approaches. Fen transferred to the security division, becoming their weapons specialist. He took to kinetic weapons like a natural, his engineer's mind appreciating the elegant simplicity of their design. One evening, Davis ran a training session in the rebuilt firing range. 20 officers of different species stood at the firing line, learning to shoot with bolt-action rifles. Sula was among them, no longer too proud to admit she had more to learn. A veteran Torth officer named Jenna fired 5 shots at a distant target. All 5 struck the center. She lowered her rifle and looked at it with genuine appreciation. "We called these primitive," she said to Davis. "But there is an elegance to simplicity, to knowing that when you need it most it will not fail you." Davis nodded. "Every weapon is a tool. The wise warrior learns all tools, not just the flashy ones. Energy weapons are remarkable, but they are not the only answer. Sometimes the old ways survive because they simply work." He walked along the firing line, offering corrections and encouragement. These aliens who had mocked him weeks before now hung on his every word. But he felt no satisfaction from their earlier dismissal, only relief that they had learned the lesson before more lives were lost. Later that night, Davis stood in the security office overlooking the station. Through the windows he could see the restored plaza, now filled with merchants and families going about their lives. Ships docked and departed, trade resumed, normalcy returned. But in the armory below, both types of weapons stood ready. Advanced energy rifles with their sophisticated targeting systems. Simple kinetic weapons with their mechanical reliability. Together, they made the station truly secure. Sula entered the office and stood beside him. "I have been thinking about something you said," she began. "About how humanity uses both types of weapons, old and new, together." "Yes?" Davis prompted. "It is not just about weapons, is it? It is a philosophy. Respecting what came before while embracing what comes next. Not discarding proven methods just because something newer exists." Davis smiled. "Now you are starting to understand." He walked to his desk where his grandfather's rifle sat in its case. He had cleaned it again that afternoon, maintaining the ritual that had served him for 20 years. The rifle was old, scarred, simple, but it had never failed him. On the wall beside it, a new plaque had been mounted. Sula had commissioned it after the battle. The inscription was simple but profound. "Technology advances, but fundamentals endure." Davis read it for perhaps the 100th time and felt something settle in his chest. Pride, maybe, or satisfaction. These aliens had learned what humanity had known for centuries. That progress was not about abandoning the past, but about building on it, that the old and the new could work together, each covering the weaknesses of the other. He picked up his rifle one more time and began to clean it again, the familiar ritual bringing comfort. Outside, the station turned through the void of space, protected now by the marriage of cutting-edge innovation and time-tested reliability. And in the armory, human kinetic weapons stood ready beside alien energy weapons, no longer mocked, no longer dismissed, just another tool in the arsenal, waiting for the day they might be needed again. Because sometimes the universe reminded even advanced civilizations that there was wisdom in the old ways, and sometimes that reminder came from a single human with a rifle and the courage to prove everyone wrong.